All Things DER podcast, brought to you by AEIC. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Cook. In this podcast, I dig in, define, and discuss where the new energy economy is heading with electric industry leaders and explore all the ways that distributed energy resources can modernize and improve our ever-evolving power grid. Thank you for joining us.
In today's episode, I'm talking with Mark Vallo, the manager of Smart Grid Performance and Support at FirstEnergy. We discussed the importance of implementing technologically advanced outage management systems while striving for social equity through the landscape of grid modernization and how the political climate of a given region determines the use of DER. From obtaining good information and reliable data to keeping safety the number one goal for both employees and customers. We dig into a variety of ways to continually and incrementally make changes to the power grid to positively impact future generations for years to come. Hi, Mark. Thank you again for being a guest on AEIC All Things DER podcast. I just thought we could jump right in. Maybe you can tell yourself and the listeners about who you are and what you are doing in this space.
Yeah, good morning, Elizabeth. Again, I'm Mark Vallo. I'm the manager of Smart Grid Performance and Support at FirstEnergy. I've got 38 years with the company, spent about half my career in fossil power plant generation, working on combustion control systems, spent some time in sales and marketing, working at large industrial as an energy systems engineer. And in 2006, I came to the wire side of the business, spent about a year and a half in one of our distribution control centers, then became the engineering manager at the illuminating company. I had that role for 3 years. And then around 2010, moved to corporate and took over responsibility for implementing distribution smart grid. In 2010, we had an AERA, Department of Energy grant for about $57 million where we studied smart grid in 3 of our operating companies where we operate at. So we did smart grid at the illuminating company in Ohio. We did smart grid at MedEd in Pennsylvania, and then we did smart grid at JCP&L in New Jersey. I probably should say that FirstEnergy is 10 operating companies in 5 states. We have about 6 million customers at FirstEnergy. We have about 2.1 million customers in Ohio, about 2 million customers in Pennsylvania, 1.3 million customers in New Jersey, and then our remaining customers are in the panhandle of Maryland and West Virginia. So again, 6 million customers in 5 states. And probably what's good in context of distributed energy resources, probably about 1% of our customers, or about 60,000 customers, produce their own electricity. But predominantly 50,000 of those, or about 85, maybe 90% of those customers are actually either in New Jersey or in Maryland. And it really has to do with the political climate, whether distributed energy resources are in favor with the state commissions and the political structures in that state. So that's a little background about who I am and the company that I work at.
One common theme that through our episodes is, every utility is very structured very differently. And so you're very unique in regards to being that you're overseeing and leading the Smart Grid Performance and Support Group. You're interacting with across all 5 of those operating, or are you focused in Ohio? I think you're all 5, right?
I do work on behalf of all 5 states, all 10 operating companies. One thing that I'll say that FirstEnergy does fairly well is our IT back office is one size fits all. So if we have an outage management system, we are deploying an ADMS, we've been on an ADMS journey. A lot of the learnings and the path we took was a sharing and collaboration through AEIC DER, hearing what other utilities were doing. But again, we have a one size fits all back office. And so if I have outages in New Jersey, I can have a system operator in Ohio dispatching line crews. And that works really well for us. Okay.
Yeah.
So again, large focus right now in Ohio because we're finishing up our first phase of what we call grid modernization in Ohio, which is, deploying that ADMS.
For our listeners, I'll just reiterate. So OMS is the outage management system. And then the word acronym ADMS is Advanced Distribution Management System. So when you say you have one common platform, is you're using the same technology for all 5 states and all operating companies.
That is correct.
That is very right. And that is really probably what you guys did to help prepare for the future of this dynamic grid where DER is going to be connecting. And you're seeing most of the focus in Jersey and Maryland, but now in Ohio, you're kind of
I think the political climate too, the Public Utility Commission in Ohio really has a vision towards grid modernization and becoming a renewable society. They certainly want to see that evolve. I mean, we did go through deregulation. We are just a wires business in Ohio, distribution and transmission. And they want us to develop the grid such that customers can produce their own electricity. So to that end, we're deploying another 200 circuits with distribution automation, volt var optimization, specifically conservation voltage reduction, known as CVR, and like minimizing customer bills through active voltage management and just making sure the customer's voltage is at an adequate level and not more of a maximum level. And then we're deploying smart meters.
And so kind of pulling up, that the tangibility to the non-utility folk is so, historically, we've had a grid where electrons flowed in one direction. So from an operating company, we really understood the phenomenon of Ohm's law. You kind of size your conductor, your transformers for a certain amount of customer on that said feeder. So the visibility, right, and the hardware that was out in the field was not as robust because you didn't really need it. You kind of just understood how it flew and you operate accordingly. But now with all of the changing dynamics at the edge, that's what you're saying. You're enabling the ability to manage your distribution feeders and substation heads with this new dynamic. And that requires you to deploy new hardware, sensoring, measurement equipment to be able to do that. And that's the grid modernization that you're speaking of? Or
Exactly. Again, I was sharing with some young engineers this morning. I was giving them actual homework assignments. And I says, hey, I want you to go to a couple stations and I want you to tell me what the peak load is on some of these feeders. What's the peak load on the station transformer? And I gave them the opportunity to look at what I would call more modern stations, and then some substations that have been in service for either 80 or 90 years. And I think what they'll find is, depending on where you're at in FirstEnergy, we have 9,000 distribution circuits, about 400 distribution subs. It's a combination of 10 operating companies with different histories. You'll find that there's absolutely zero data historically at some of our substations. We don't know what we got until we go walk a guy into the substation and he calls back on the phone. And that's part of this evolvement of the grid and the advanced distribution management system, is taking this older infrastructure. And I've got this expression: you give good operators good information, they make good decisions on behalf of our customers. So right. Good operators, good information. Now it's that information part that's critical and key. And as we evolved into this DER space, like you said, the non-traditional power flows, going from the transmission down through the station transformer and out through the distribution lines. Now we have voltage and power sources feeding back onto the system. We actually, now at FirstEnergy, we have not only circuits, but substations that at times are feeding back onto the transmission system. 30 or 40 years ago, nobody would have thought of that. Now we're in a space where it's critical that we see what's happening to the grid. Reliability, safety are our tenants on behalf of our customers. That non-traditional power flow needs to be understood. And that's why we're going through a grid modernization effort and deploying an advanced distribution management system on behalf of our operators, so that we can plan for that proliferation of distributed energy resources that's soon to come for us.
And would you say, even now knowing what you know and seeing the grid modernization play out in the different states and the different operating companies, so your different maturities, would you state that even without a DER proliferation or a large amount, however you want to quantify it, having those systems and that situational awareness to do traditional operation provides great benefit to an operating company?
That, Elizabeth, that's a great question. And what it gives me chills to talk about this. In today's day and age, when people come home from work and the kids are doing their homework, and we're an electrical society, and even though our reliability at FirstEnergy is pretty darn good, customers don't like outages, because when the electricity goes down, the Wi-Fi goes down, their streaming services go down, and the ability of our lifestyles are upset because the things that we like to do in the evenings until the electricity comes back. So that being said, although reliability is good, it always can be better, right? Like, I do have an outage. Okay, can we use technology like distribution automation to get the lights on quicker? Can we do things to better serve our customers? And the way to do that is, again, provide our operators with grid intelligence so that they can quickly restore customers from outages when they have them. And again, as we deploy some of this technology, it's going to be interesting how we integrate that with distributed energy resources.
And that kind of comes to some terminology, right? So like what you have, deployed is your outage management system on steroids, right? Like the capability to have full situational awareness to your crews, to the outages, to like what your next action is. That's an advancement in itself in our space. Then there's the distribution management system where you're able to have this real-time power flow at the fingertips of your operators with or without this interactive edge, aka DER, distributed energy resources. Right. So like the next step a lot of us are contemplating is really, embracing or deploying something called DERMS, DER management system. So right. I'll just ask, like, where's FE in that space? Because I think, one thing we've talked about in a couple other episodes and here in the industry is DERMS is a very buzzworthy word. And we interpret it a little bit differently. So is there an interpretation that FE has?
Absolutely. And again, having been part of AEIC DER group for a better part of 5 or 6 years now, it's been an evolution for us. First, we knew at FirstEnergy that we were going to have to get in the ADMS space and deploy an ADMS because that's your platform for adding this DERMS component. Okay, you have advanced applications, you have your outage management. The DERMS is a package that you layer onto that platform that uses that existing grid intelligence to further identify what's happening with DER. We've started to look at DERMS at FirstEnergy. I'm not quite sure which jurisdiction we're gonna study this in, but I expect it to pick up some really quick traction once we're in our space. Again, our go live for our current ADMS is this August, so we're turning things on in a big way on behalf of 10 operating companies, 6 million customers. It's going to be a big shift because the system that we have been using, and it's not even considered a DMS, it's just an outage management system, is over 20 years old. Its ability to be modified it's beyond its useful life. So the timing's right for that. Once we put that in the rearview mirror and we're cruising down the highway with this new fancy ADMS, we're going to quickly want to deploy a DERMS. We're already starting to study that. The question really becomes, do we stay with our ADMS vendor? And I've seen their features. I like what I see. But there's also the ability of maybe looking at quote unquote best in class. I know other utilities have studied DERMS, have had some DERMS pilots. Always anxious to hear more about that. But we're going to quickly start doing some things with DERMS at FirstEnergy. That's our next level. And as far as the time frame, I'm really expecting us to be in a space deploying something either on a pilot type basis within the next 2 or 3 years.
And I think, so there's a couple things that you touched upon, but like when we utility folk, to us, it's commonality, right? Like we have been doing load management, demand response from like the substation head, right? So what is evolving to us and to also the technology and allowing it to be feasible is this granularity down to each individual meter. So when we talk about DERMS, like the DMS is a big step for a lot of us, right? And we just spoke of that. The DERMS is really enabling those systems that need to be in place to communicate to each individual meter and to observe and have awareness of how the electrons are flowing. And that's like the next level. And it's just very exciting because now with machine learning and data analytics and the power of computers, like we're able to, as an industry, start embracing that high amount of data. So it's going to be an exciting time. So I'm glad to hear you guys are on the DERMS journey as well. I want to kind of shift focus because I think this is another area that you and I have a lot of commonality in. When we think, and I think about the whole all things DER, what it has done for each, I think, utility in all of its different ownership structures, state regulatory environments, is given us this ability to step back and really look at the whole operations of a grid, right? So there's the moment a customer wants to do something or connect, all the way to executing the ability to serve. So there's an interconnection process, there's a planning process, there's an asset management and ensuring the health of the assets, then there's the actual operation of the grid. When I think about embracing this new technology, one area is like, how do we ensure that we are rolling this out to all and really planning this smart grid for all of our grid connected or AK customers? So what's the FE's perspective on kind of like embracing this idea of advancing, our energy smart grid equity to all that we serve?
Elizabeth, that's a good question. And there's a term out there now called environmental justice. I'm passionate about making sure that when we talk about smart grid or we talk about DER, that it's not like a class system where if you have the wherewithal to be in the DER space, you're playing on the playground with what I call disrespect to others. Like others are playing for your playground, so to say, and nobody else can play on your playground. I don't like that. I like the concept of allowing all to play on the playground, but all benefit from what's going on with distributed energy resources. So you may not have the financial wherewithal to install solar or wind at your location as a consumer, but how can all customers benefit from this dynamic grid and share in a greener society? And so at FirstEnergy, we're starting to look at what I call smart grid projects that just aren't for the suburbs, that are for maybe some of the inner city areas. We're starting to study how we can allow all our customers benefit from distributed energy resources. We're early in this space and we've got some great ideas. I probably don't want to share much more than that at this point because some of this might be part of a regulatory offering.
Yeah, definitely. I understand. And I guess I just wanted to share because I think it's not just us thinking about this big dynamic, if you think about the grid when it first started, there was the have and have nots, in the 1880s, the 1900s, and we have evolved. Right. And then in the 1930s was the New Deal where we electrified rural America and we really built the infrastructure so that all could have electrical power. And here we are, in 2020s, really looking about how do we reinvest in this very important infrastructure. It's the lifeline of society. And while we're reinvesting, we have all of this new technology that we, the ones that have been serving for 100 plus years, really need to be able to have that innovative entrepreneurial thought process of how can we continue to serve, advance these technologies and do it for all. And so it's not just us talking about it, right? A lot of the FOAs and kind of opportunities out there is going to be all about, is it addressing social equity, right? That's a question they ask. Can it create a workforce and job creation? And if you think about it, when we have new technology and new ways of connecting things to the grid, that creates a whole new generation of a workforce. So it's just an exciting time. And I just, glad also FE's thinking about, how do we deploy it in this just way? Well, I think this has been a great conversation. Hopefully fruitful to our listeners. And I'm just going to ask you, as you're kind of, you're immersing yourself in this area, as you're winding down your career, what do you want to be known for as you kind of continue to educate the next generation and move forward?
That's a great question. And as I get to work with younger engineers, I just had a new engineer start Monday. I had 2 other engineers start a couple of weeks ago. And the most important thing we do every day is to go home safely to our families. And if we can't do that, nothing else matters. But that also applies to our customers. If we can't be reliable for our customers and safe, then it all doesn't matter, right? So as this grid evolves and becomes different, the number one tenet of allowing others to connect to our grid is the safety of our customers and all customers. And it's important that we do that. So we've evolved in this smart grid space in conjunction with DER. I'm excited about the things that are going to be quickly on the horizon for us. And if I'm going to be known for anything, I really want to take smart grid into the city and allow all customers to benefit from this new dynamic grid. So thank you for the opportunity to share.
Yeah, that's an exciting that's where you're focused. Okay, well, thanks again. I will wrap it up for the listeners. I think this is fruitful. And as with all other episodes, please feel free to reach out to me and we can connect and continue the conversation outside the podcast as well.
Elizabeth, thanks for the opportunity to share.
That's a wrap for this week's episode of All Things DER. Thanks for tuning in. I hope today's conversation got you thinking about new and creative ways to improve our power grid. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to be the first to hear new episodes. This podcast is brought to you by AEIC, the place where operations leaders come together to share knowledge and provide guidance to the electric utility industry. We'll be back with a new episode next week. Until then, keep powering on.